Some love stories begin with a grand gesture, a dramatic confession, a passionate kiss in the rain. Others begin with silence, with words written but never spoken, with feelings buried so deep they can only live on paper, hidden in drawers and tucked under desk chairs. This is the story of two hearts, one African, one Korean, who kept writing letters to each other but never found the courage to send them. This is the story of Naledi and Jihoon, and the words they could never say out loud. Naledi arrived in Seoul on a cold autumn morning in October. 24 years old, fresh from Johannesburg, South Africa, with a scholarship to study international relations at Korea University. She'd packed her entire life into 2 suitcases, clothes that wouldn't be warm enough for Korean winter, books her grandmother had given her, and a leather journal her mother insisted she bring. "Write everything down," her mother had said at the airport, holding Naledi's face in her hands. "The good days and the hard ones. Writing helps you remember who you are when you're far from home." Seoul was nothing like Johannesburg. The city felt fast, relentlessly fast. People moved like water rushing downstream, everyone knowing exactly where they were going, speaking a language that sounded like music Naledi couldn't yet hear the rhythm of. The subway was a maze of numbers and colors. The streets were a blur of neon signs. In Hangul, she was still learning to read. Even the air felt different, crisper, thinner, carrying the smell of street food she couldn't name and the constant hum of a city that never truly slept. Naledi felt small, invisible, like a single still note in a symphony too complex to understand. Her apartment was a tiny studio in Annamdong, close to campus. Bare walls, a single window overlooking other apartment buildings, a mattress on the floor. It was functional, practical, and achingly lonely. The first few nights, she lay awake listening to sounds she didn't recognize. Korean conversations through thin walls, the melody of Korean television shows, the strange quiet that somehow felt louder than any noise. She'd open her journal and write, "Day 3 in Seoul. Still don't know if I made the right choice. Everything here moves too fast. I move too slow. I wonder if I'll ever find my rhythm in this place." On her 4th day in Seoul, Naledi had her first class at the university library, a required orientation for international students. She arrived early, as she always did, not wanting to draw attention by coming in late. The library was beautiful. 6 floors of books and study spaces, floor-to-ceiling windows letting in autumn light that made everything glow golden. Students sat at long wooden tables, heads bent over laptops and notebooks, the air filled with the soft sound of pages turning and keyboards clicking. Naledi found an empty table near the back, away from everyone else. She set down her bag, pulled out her orientation packet, and tried to look like she belonged. She was reading through the library rules when she realized she needed a pen. Hers was at the bottom of her bag somewhere. She stood, leaning over to dig through the mess of notebooks and chargers and hand sanitizer, and someone collided with her. Hard enough that her bag spilled. Books tumbled to the floor, her orientation packet scattered. And a pen, the one she'd just found, rolled across the wooden floor like it was trying to escape. "Oh no, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you. Are you okay?" The voice was gentle, concerned, speaking English with a soft Korean accent that made each word sound careful and sincere. Naledi looked up from her hands and knees where she was gathering her things, and she froze. The young man kneeling beside her, helping collect her books, had the kindest eyes she'd ever seen. Warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners with genuine worry. Dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead. A navy blue sweater and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like he belonged in this library. Like he was part of its quiet, studious atmosphere. "I'm fine," Naledi managed, her voice smaller than she intended. "Just new here, still figuring out how to navigate without causing disasters." He smiled then, a soft smile that reached his eyes, and handed her the books he'd collected. Soul can be a lot, especially when you're new. "I'm Jihoon. Kim Jihoon." "Naledi," she said, taking her books.
Naledi Mokwena. Jihoon tilted his head slightly, trying out the name. "Naledi. That's beautiful. What does it mean?" No one had asked her that before. Not the immigration officer, not her dormitory manager, not any of the people she'd tried to have halting conversations with at the convenience store. "It means star," Naledi said softly. "In Setswana, one of the languages we speak in South Africa." "Star," Jihoon repeated, like he was committing it to memory. "That's really beautiful. Does it feel strange being so far from home?" And something about the way he asked, not curious in a probing way, but in a way that suggested he genuinely wanted to know, made Naledi's carefully constructed walls crack just a little. "Yes," she admitted. "Everything here is so different. The language, the food, the way people interact. I feel like I'm constantly one step behind everyone else, trying to catch up to a rhythm I can't quite hear." Jihoon nodded slowly, like he understood something deeper than just her words. "I grew up in Busan. When I first moved to Seoul for university 3 years ago, I felt the same way. Seoul moves at its own speed. It doesn't wait for anyone. But eventually," he paused, searching for the right words, "eventually you find your own rhythm. It doesn't have to match everyone else's." Naledi felt something shift in her chest. A small loosening of the tightness that had lived there since she arrived. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for saying that, and for helping with my books, and for not laughing at me for spilling everything." "Why would I laugh?" Jihoon looked genuinely confused. "Everyone's new once. Everyone struggles. That's just being human." And in that moment, in that golden lit library, with students studying around them and the soft sound of pages turning, Naledi felt Seoul become just a little less overwhelming. The city suddenly felt like it had one friendly face, one person who saw her. They stood there for a moment, neither quite sure how to end the conversation. Naledi gestured vaguely toward her table. Right, yes, of course, but, if you ever need help navigating the library or Seoul in general, I'm here most afternoons, usually on the third floor by the International Relations section. International Relations? Naledi's eyes lit up. That's what I'm studying. Jihoon's face brightened. Really? Me too. I'm in my final year, graduate program. Then maybe, Naledi hesitated, maybe I'll see you around? I hope so, Jihoon said. And he meant it. After he left, Naledi sat at her table, staring at the orientation packet without really seeing it. Her heart was doing something strange, beating a little faster, feeling a little lighter. She pulled out her journal and wrote, Day 4. Met someone today. His name is Jihoon. He helped me pick up my books after I made a fool of myself in the library. He has kind eyes, the kind that make you feel like maybe this city isn't so cold after all. What Naledi didn't know was that across the library, on the third floor by the International Relations section, Jihoon was sitting at his usual desk, staring at his laptop screen without seeing it either. He was thinking about warm brown eyes and a name that meant star, about someone who'd traveled across the world alone and admitted she was struggling, about a voice that sounded like home, even though he'd never heard it before. He opened a blank document on his laptop, meant to work on his thesis. Instead, he typed, Naledi, star. She looked lost, but trying not to show it. I know that feeling. I remember it. Then he closed the document without saving it. Too personal. Too strange. He didn't even know her. But 3 days later, when Naledi came back to the library, this time with her pen already in hand, she found herself climbing to the third floor, just to see, just to check if maybe, and there he was, at a desk by the window, surrounded by books, typing on his laptop with that same focused expression she'd seen before. She hesitated. Should she say something? Would it be weird to approach him? But Jihoon looked up, as if sensing someone watching. When he saw her, his face transformed. That same soft smile, the one that reached his eyes. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. An invitation. Naledi crossed the floor and sat down, setting her bag on the floor, pulling out her own laptop. Welcome to the third floor, Jihoon said quietly, mindful of the library silence. Best view on campus. He was right. The window overlooked the campus courtyard, where autumn leaves were turning gold and red, falling like slow rain. It's beautiful, Naledi whispered. It's my favorite place in Seoul. When the city gets too loud, I come here. It helps me remember there's still quiet in the world.
They studied in comfortable silence for an hour. Occasionally, Jihoon would push a book across the table with a sticky note. This might help with your paper on UN peacekeeping. Naledi would smile and mouth, "Thank you." When the library announced it was closing in 15 minutes, they packed up their things slowly, neither quite ready to leave. Same time next week?
Jihoon asked as they walked toward the exit. Same time next week, Naledi agreed. And so it began. What started as one afternoon became 2, then 3, then 4. By the end of October, they had an unspoken routine. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, 3rd floor window seats. Studying in the kind of comfortable silence that usually takes years to build. But silence wasn't all they shared. During study breaks, they'd talk. Small conversations at first, about their classes, about professors they liked or didn't, about the best places to get coffee near campus. Then deeper things started slipping out. One November afternoon, when the first snow was falling outside the window, Jihoon asked, "What do you miss most about home?" Naledi thought about it, watching the snowflakes drift past the window. "My grandmother's voice," she said finally. "She raised me mostly. My parents worked a lot. She'd tell me stories every night about our ancestors, about the land, about being strong even when the world tells you you're not. Her voice was like a blanket, safe, warm. She sounds wonderful." "She was." Naledi's voice caught slightly. "She passed away last year. That's part of why I came here. She always told me to see the world, to not let fear keep me small. So I'm trying, even though some days I feel very small anyway." Jihoon was quiet for a long moment. "You're not small," he said finally. "You're one of the bravest people I know." Naledi looked at him, surprised. "You barely know me." "I know you left everything familiar to study in a country where you didn't know anyone, where you didn't speak the language, where you knew you'd be different from almost everyone around you. That's not small, Naledi. That's extraordinary." Naledi felt tears prickling at her eyes. She blinked them back. "Thank you," she whispered. "I needed to hear that." The next week, it was Jihoon who opened up. They were walking across campus after a late study session, the December air cold enough to see their breath. Christmas lights were starting to appear in the trees, making the campus feel magical. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" Jihoon asked suddenly. "Of course." "I write music," he said. "Songs, melodies, lyrics. I've been doing it since I was 15. But I've never let anyone hear it." "Why not?" Jihoon shoved his hands deeper into his coat pockets. "Because my family has plans for me. My father owns a manufacturing company in Busan. I'm the oldest son. After I finish my master's degree, I'm expected to come home and take over. There's no room in that plan for music, for dreams that don't fit the mold." "That sounds lonely," Naledi said softly. "It is." Jihoon's voice was quiet. "But it's duty, responsibility. That's what matters in my family." They walked in silence for a while. Then Naledi said, "My grandmother used to say that duty without joy is just a slow death. That honoring family means honoring who you are, not killing who you are." Jihoon stopped walking, looked at her. "Your grandmother was very wise." "She was," Naledi agreed. "But I'm still figuring out how to actually live by that wisdom. It's easier to quote her than to be brave like her." "Maybe we're both learning," Jihoon said. "Maybe," Naledi agreed. And they continued walking, closer now than before, their shoulders almost touching. By mid-December, something had shifted between them. The conversations went longer. The silences felt charged with things unsaid. When their hands accidentally brushed, reaching for the same book, they both pulled away too quickly, hearts racing. Naledi found herself thinking about Jihoon at odd moments, while eating breakfast, while walking to class, while lying in bed at night. The way he pushed his glasses up when he was concentrating, the way he'd bring her coffee without asking, somehow always knowing when she needed it, the way he listened, really listened, like every word she said mattered. And Jihoon found himself doing the same, watching for Naledi in the library even on days they hadn't planned to meet, saving interesting articles to share with her, writing more music than he had in years, all of it somehow infused with images of warm brown eyes and a laugh that sounded like home. But neither of them said anything. Neither reached across that invisible line between friendship and something more. Because they both knew, though they'd never discussed it, that crossing that line would complicate everything. Jihoon's family, his future in Busan, Naledi's scholarship and study abroad visa, the fact that in 6 months she'd have to decide whether to stay or return to South Africa. So many reasons to keep their feelings locked away. On the last day before winter break, they met at the library one final time. The campus was nearly empty, most students already gone home. Tomorrow, Jihoon would take the train to Busan. Naledi would stay in Seoul. Her flight home was too expensive, and she decided to use the break to explore the city. They studied for a while, but neither could focus. Finally, as the sun began to set outside the window, painting the snow orange and pink, Jihoon spoke. "I'll miss this," he said quietly. "The library?" Naledi asked, though she knew that wasn't what he meant. "This," Jihoon said, gesturing between them. "You. Talking to you. Being around you. It's the best part of my week. Of my whole semester, really." Naledi's heart hammered in her chest. "Mine too," she whispered. They looked at each other across the table, so much unspoken hanging in the air between them. Jihoon opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Naledi, But his phone rang, loud in the library quiet, his mother's name on the screen. He answered, switching to Korean, his voice changing, becoming more formal, more controlled. After a brief conversation, he hung up. "I have to go," he said, looking miserable. "I must take care of some business for my family in Seoul before I leave tomorrow. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry," Naledi said, though disappointment sat heavy in her chest. "Family is important." They packed up in silence, walked to the library exit together, stood outside in the cold December evening, snow beginning to fall again. "Have a good break," Jihoon said. "You too." They hugged, brief, careful, the kind of hug friends give. But Naledi felt Jihoon's heartbeat against her cheek, racing as fast as her own. When they pulled apart, Jihoon looked like he wanted to say something else, but instead, he just smiled sadly and walked away, hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched against the cold. Naledi watched him go until he disappeared into the subway station. Then she walked back to her apartment, climbed the stairs to her tiny studio and sat at her desk. She pulled out her journal and a pen, and she began to write. Reading slowly. Dear Jihoon, there is something about the way you listen to me that makes me feel like I matter, like my thoughts and feelings and dreams aren't too much or too strange. You make Seoul feel less lonely. You make this whole experience feel less scary. I think I'm falling for you. No, I know I am. But I can't tell you because you have a future waiting in Busan, and I have a life to return to in South Africa. Because you deserve someone who fits into your world, not someone who complicates it. So I'm writing this instead. These words you'll never read. This confession you'll never hear. I wish I was braver. I wish the world was different. I wish loving you was simple. But it's not. So I'll keep this letter hidden. I'll smile when we meet again after break. I'll pretend my heart doesn't skip when you say my name. And maybe that's enough. Maybe this quiet, unspoken thing is all we're meant to have. Naledi. She read it over once, twice, then carefully folded the letter and placed it in her dress drawer under her passport and scholarship papers. Hidden. Safe. Unspoken.
What Naledi didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that across the country, in his childhood bedroom in Busan, Jihoon was doing exactly the same thing. Sitting at his old desk, surrounded by remnants of his teenage years, music posters, old notebooks, a guitar in the corner he hadn't played in years, he pulled out his phone and opened a new note. And he wrote, Naledi, you make Seoul feel warm. Before I met you, this city was just the place I lived, a stepping stone to the life my family planned for me. But now when I walk across campus, when I sit in that library, when I see snow falling, I think of you, of your laugh, of the way you tilt your head when you're thinking, of how you're brave enough to be vulnerable. I wish I could tell you that I'm falling in love with you, that every Tuesday and Thursday I count down the hours until I can see you again, that your name, Star, fits you perfectly, because you've become my light in this city. But I can't tell you, because I'm not free, because I have obligations and expectations that don't include falling for someone my family would never accept. Because loving you would be selfish when I can't promise you any kind of future. So I'm writing this instead. Words I'll never send. Feelings I'll never speak. Maybe it's better this way. Maybe some things are meant to live only in our hearts, where they can't be complicated by reality. I hope you have a beautiful break. I hope Seoul shows you its magic. And I hope you never know how much I wish things were different. Jihoon. He saved the note in a folder on his phone labeled Music Lyrics, where no one would think to look. Then he turned off his light and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about a woman whose name meant star and who'd somehow become his whole universe. And so the winter break began, with two people in two different parts of the country lying awake, thinking about each other, writing letters they'd never send, carrying feelings they couldn't speak. Because sometimes the hardest kind of love is the kind you choose to keep quiet, the kind that lives in silence, in unsent letters, in words that exist only on paper, hidden away from the light. Winter break passed slowly for Naledi. Seoul in December was beautiful. Christmas lights strung across every street, couples walking hand in hand through Myeongdong, the city covered in snow that made everything look like a postcard. But Naledi experienced it all alone. She walked through Bukchon Hanak village, the traditional Korean houses, looking like something from a historical drama. She visited Gyeongbogung Palace, watching the changing of the guard ceremony with a group of tourists, all of them with someone to share the moment with. She ate tteokbokki from street vendors, tried different cafes, took the subway to different neighborhoods just to explore. And everywhere she went, she thought of Jihoon. She'd pull out her phone to text him a dozen times a day about the beautiful places she was seeing, about funny things that happened, about how she'd finally tried kimchi jjigae and understood why he told her it was comfort in a bowl. But she never hit send. Because what would she say? I miss you. I wish you were here. I can't stop thinking about you. All of it was too much. Too revealing. Too dangerous. So she wrote in her journal, pages and pages of observations about Seoul, about the places she visited, about the loneliness of being a tourist in your own temporary home. And sometimes, late at night, when the city was finally quiet, she'd pull out that hidden letter and read it. The words she'd written to Jihoon. The confession she'd never make. It became her ritual. Her secret. The one place where she could be completely honest about how she felt. In Busan, Jihoon was having his own difficult break. Family dinners every night where his father discussed the business, production numbers, profit margins, 5-year plans that all included Jihoon taking over after graduation. His mother asking when he'd start dating properly, when he'd find the nice Korean girl from a good family to marry. You're 27, Jihoon. It's time to think about your future seriously. She'd say, passing him more banchan, and Jihoon would nod and smile. And say, yes, mother, while thinking about a woman whose name meant star, and whose future would take her back to South Africa. He'd retreat to his old room after dinner and write. Song after song. Melodies that sounded like longing. Lyrics about distance and duty and loving someone you can't have. And sometimes, late at night, he'd open that note on his phone, the letter to Naledi, and he'd read it. Add to it. Delete parts. Rewrite others. It became his confession. His therapy. The one place where he could admit the truth even to himself. They both counted down the days until the semester started again, until they'd see each other at the library, until things could return to that comfortable routine, studying in silence, taking breaks to talk, walking across campus together. They just had to make it through winter break. The spring semester began on a cold January morning. Naledi arrived at the library on Tuesday afternoon. Their usual day, her heart beating faster than normal. She'd thought about this moment all break, rehearse what she'd say, how she'd act natural, how she'd pretend the letter in her drawer didn't exist. She climbed to the third floor, turned the corner toward their usual spot by the window, and Jihoon was there. Relief and joy flooded through her. He'd come. He was here. Everything would go back to normal. She walked over, smiling. "Hi." Jihoon looked up, and for just a second, his face transformed. Pure happiness, the kind you can't fake. But then something shuddered. His expression became careful, controlled. "Hi. How was your break?" "Good. Lonely, but good. I explored a lot of Seoul. How was Busan?"
"Fine." His answer was clipped. He looked back down at his laptop. Naledi stood there, confused. This wasn't how she'd imagined this going. Where was the warmth? The easy conversation? The connection that had felt so natural before? "Can I..." She gestured to the chair across from him. "Actually, I'm using that for my books," Jihoon said, not meeting her eyes. "Sorry, maybe try the second floor." The words hit Naledi like a physical blow. She stood frozen for a moment, trying to understand what was happening. "Oh, okay, sure. I'll just..." She backed away, her face burning. "See you around." Jihoon didn't respond, just kept staring at his laptop screen. Naledi fled to the second floor, found an empty table in the corner, and sat down in a daze. What just happened? Had she done something wrong? Said something offensive before break that she couldn't remember? Why was he being so cold? She tried to study but couldn't focus. Her mind kept replaying the interaction. The way he'd barely looked at her. The dismissive tone. The complete absence of the warmth that had defined their entire friendship. Thursday came. Their other usual day. Naledi almost didn't go to the library, but she forced herself. Maybe Tuesday had been a fluke. Maybe he had a bad day. Maybe everything would be normal now. She went to the third floor again. Jihoon was in the same spot. This time, she didn't approach the window seats. She sat several tables away where she could see him, but where he couldn't easily see her. And she watched. He studied for an hour, took a phone call in the hallway. She could see him through the glass, speaking in Korean, his expression serious. Came back, packed up his things, and left without once looking in her direction, without once acknowledging she was there. That night, Naledi cried. Not dramatic, loud crying, but the quiet, painful kind. The kind where you're not sure exactly why you're so hurt, but you know something important has broken. She pulled out her journal and wrote, reading slowly, "He's avoiding me. I don't know why. I don't know what I did. But the person who came back from break isn't the same person who left. It's like he's built a wall, and I'm not allowed past it anymore. It hurts more than I expected. More than it should for someone who was just a friend. But he wasn't just a friend. And they both knew it."
2 weeks passed, then 3. The pattern continued. Jihoon came to the library on Tuesdays and Thursdays, like clockwork. But he sat alone. If Naledi tried to approach, he'd suddenly remember he had somewhere to be. If she sent him a message asking if everything was okay, he'd respond with one word: fine. In class, the one international relations seminar they shared, he'd arrive late and leave early, sit on the opposite side of the room, never make eye contact. Naledi felt herself fading. The loneliness she'd felt at the beginning of her time in Seoul came rushing back, but worse now, because she knew what it felt like to not be lonely. She knew what it was like to have someone who saw her, who listened to her, who made Seoul feel like home. And now that was gone. Her grades started slipping. Not dramatically, but enough that her academic advisor noticed. She stopped exploring the city on weekends, stopped trying to make other friends. She went to class, went to the library, but not the third floor anymore, went back to her apartment. She was surviving, not living, just surviving. One February evening, after a particularly hard day, Naledi broke. She couldn't take the silence anymore, couldn't take the not knowing, couldn't take the carefully constructed distance. She waited outside the library, knowing Jihoon would have to walk past to get to the subway. When she saw him coming, she stepped into his path. "Jihoon, we need to talk." He stopped. For a moment, he looked like he might refuse, but then he nodded stiffly. "Okay." They walked to a quiet corner of campus, away from other students, stood facing each other in the cold evening air, their breath visible in the space between them. "Did I do something wrong?" Naledi asked, her voice shaking but determined. "Because you've been avoiding me for weeks and I don't understand why. If I offended you or hurt you, I need to know so I can apologize." Jihoon shook his head immediately. "No, it's not you. You didn't do anything wrong." "Then why does it feel like you're disappearing? Why won't you even look at me anymore?" Jihoon was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was strained. My parents, they want me to move back home after this semester. My father isn't well. The company needs me sooner than planned. I'll finish my thesis remotely and graduate in absentia. Naledi felt her stomach drop. You're leaving? Yes. When? End of March. 6 weeks. But what does that have to do with avoiding me? Jihoon finally looked at her then, and the pain in his eyes was so raw, it took her breath away. Because he stopped. Started again. Because the way I feel about you, it's not simple. And I thought if I could just create distance now, it would hurt later when I have to leave, when this ends. Naledi felt tears burning in her eyes now. The way you feel about me? Jihoon looked away, jaw clenched. Don't make me say it. Why not? Because what's the point? His voice rose slightly. What's the point in saying it when nothing can come of it? I'm moving back to Busan. You're going back to South Africa eventually. My family, he laughed bitterly. My family would never accept. They have very specific ideas about who I should be with. Someone Korean, someone from the right kind of family. Dating someone from another culture, another race. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. So, you're pushing me away before anything even starts? You're deciding for both of us that it's not worth it? I'm trying to protect us both, Jihoon said. I thought it would hurt less this way. Does it? Naledi asked, tears streaming down her face now. Does it hurt less? Jihoon closed his eyes. No, it doesn't. They stood there in silence, the campus empty around them, the weight of everything unsaid crushing down on them both. Finally, Naledi spoke, her voice hollow. I thought you were braver than this. Jihoon flinched like she'd struck him. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Naledi. But sorry couldn't fix this. Sorry couldn't bridge the distance he created. Sorry couldn't change his family or his obligations or the fact that he was choosing duty over the possibility of them. Naledi nodded once, wiping her face. Goodbye, Jihoon.
She turned and walked away before he could respond, before she could see if he'd try to stop her. He didn't. That night, Naledi pulled out the letter she'd written in December, read it through tears. Then she wrote more. You were right to protect yourself. I wish you protected me too. But maybe this is better. Better to know now that love isn't enough. That feelings don't matter if you're not willing to fight for them. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I'm heartbroken. But mostly I'm just sad. Because we could have had 6 more weeks. 6 more conversations and stolen glances and pretending we were just friends while secretly being so much more. But you chose distance instead. You chose fear over possibility. And I have to accept that. She folded the letter and put it back in the drawer. Added the new page. 2 letters now. 2 confessions. Growing longer with things she couldn't say. Across the city, in his apartment, Jihoon sat at his desk with his phone open to that note, that letter to Naledi he'd been writing since December. And he added to it. I saw the hurt in your eyes today, and it broke me. You said I'm not brave. And you're right. I'm not. I'm a coward who's choosing the safe path instead of fighting for what I want. I want to call you, to run to your apartment, to tell you that you're right, that I'm wrong, that we should try anyway, regardless of the obstacles. But I can't, because I know myself. I know I'll end up hurting you worse when I have to choose between you and my family, when the reality of our differences becomes impossible to ignore, when loving you stops being enough. So, I'm letting you go now, while we both still have a chance to heal, while the damage is still manageable. It doesn't feel manageable. It feels like I'm tearing out part of my soul. But this is the right thing, the responsible thing, even if it's killing me. He saved the note, closed his phone, stared at the wall, and wondered if doing the right thing was supposed to feel this much like dying. The next few weeks were agony for both of them. They stopped going to the library at the same times, stopped attending the seminar they shared, both switching to online participation, stopped existing in each other's orbits entirely. Seoul, which had briefly felt like home to Naledi, became foreign again. Every place reminded her of Jihoon. Every conversation they'd had echoed in her memory. The library was haunted. The campus was haunted. Her own apartment was haunted by the ghost of what could have been. She threw herself into her studies, worked on papers until 3 a.m, volunteered for every extra project her professors offered. Anything to keep her mind occupied. Anything to stop thinking about soft brown eyes and the way someone had said her name like it was something precious. Jihoon did the same, finished his thesis in record time, helped his father with business transitions remotely, started packing his apartment weeks before he needed to, kept himself so busy there was no time to feel. Except late at night. Late at night, the feelings always found him.
March 20th arrived, 10 days before Jihoon's departure. His last official day on campus. He needed to submit his thesis physically and meet with his advisor one last time. He went to the library early, wanting to avoid the chance of running into anyone, especially her. The third floor was empty. He sat at his usual spot by the window, one last time, and looked out at the campus he'd spent 4 years on. The trees were beginning to bloom. Spring was coming. New beginnings everywhere. Except for him. He was gathering his things to leave when he heard footsteps. Turned. And there was Naledi. She stopped when she saw him, her eyes widening. Clearly hadn't expected to find him there either. They stared at each other across the expanse of the library floor. 6 weeks of silence and hurt and longing suspended between them. "I'm sorry," they both said, at the same time. Despite everything, Naledi almost smiled. "You first." Jihoon took a breath. "I'm sorry for how I handled everything, for pushing you away, for hurting you. You deserved better than that. I'm sorry for calling you a coward. That wasn't fair. You were just trying to protect yourself. I understand that. When do you leave?" "March 30th. 10 days. She nodded. "I hope Busan is good to you. I hope your father recovers. I hope you find whatever you're looking for. I hope Seoul becomes the home you wanted it to be.
I hope you know you deserve every good thing, every happiness. They stood there, both wanting to say more, so much more. But the distance between them, 6 weeks of distance, a lifetime of distance, felt impossible to cross. Goodbye, Naledi, Jihoon said. Goodbye, Jihoon. He walked past her toward the stairs. She stayed frozen in place, listening to his footsteps fade. And then he was gone. Naledi sank into the chair at their old table, the one by the window where they'd spent so many afternoons. The seat was still warm from where he'd been sitting. She looked out at the campus, at the spring beginning to bloom, at students walking past, laughing, living their lives, unaware of the small tragedy that had just played out on the third floor of the library. And she realized this was really the end. Not the confrontation in February, not the weeks of silence. This quiet goodbye, this final look. This was where their story ended, before it ever really began. That night, she pulled out the letter one more time, added a final entry. Reading slowly. Today I saw you for the last time, and I wanted to be angry. I wanted to yell or cry or demand that you fight for us, but I couldn't. Because I saw it in your eyes too. The same pain, the same wish that things were different, the same knowledge that they're not. So this is where our story ends, Jihoon. Not with a kiss or a confession or a dramatic gesture, but with a quiet goodbye in a library where we almost fell in love. Maybe that's fitting. Maybe some love stories aren't meant to have endings. They're just meant to exist. Incomplete, unspoken, living forever in the space of what if. I'll carry you with me. I'll remember you. I'll wonder sometimes if you think of me too. But I'll also let you go. Because holding on to something that was never really mine will only hurt more. Goodbye, Jihoon. Thank you for showing me what it feels like to be seen. Even if only briefly. Even if it ended too soon. I hope you find your music again. I hope you find yourself. I hope you find peace. Naledi. Your star. She folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the drawer with all the others. A collection of words never sent, feelings never spoken, a love that existed only on paper. And then, she closed the drawer and tried to move on. March 30th came too quickly, and not quickly enough. Jihoon packed the last box in his apartment at dawn. Everything he'd accumulated during 4 years in Seoul. Books, clothes, kitchen supplies he'd barely used, memories he couldn't pack but carried anyway. All of it fit into 6 boxes and 2 suitcases. His apartment, empty now, echoed with every step. He stood in the middle of the bare room and thought about all the nights he'd spent here writing music, working on his thesis, lying awake, thinking about someone whose name meant star. He deleted the apps he didn't need from his phone, closed his Seoul bank account, said goodbye to his few close friends. There was only one place left he needed to visit before catching his train to Busan, the library. One last time. It was early, barely 7 in the morning, and the campus was quiet. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom now, petals drifting like pink snow in the morning breeze. Spring had arrived, bringing beauty to a departure that felt like morning. The library wouldn't open for another hour, but Jihoon had kept his student ID. The night entrance was still accessible. He climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, in the dim, pre-opening light.
walked to the window seat, their seat, and he sat down. The view looked the same. Campus sprawled out below, buildings and pathways and trees he'd walked past 1,000 times. But it all felt different now, like it belonged to someone else's life. Someone who was young and hopeful and believed that feelings mattered more than duty. He wasn't that person anymore. Or maybe he'd never been that person. He pulled out his phone, opened that note. The letter he'd been writing to Naledi for 4 months. It had grown into something enormous. Pages and pages of things he'd never said, feelings he'd never confessed, dreams he'd never allowed himself to voice. He read through it one last time. And then he made a decision. He grabbed a piece of paper from his bag, wrote the letter out by hand. Not all of it, that would take hours, but the essential parts. The truth he needed to leave behind, even if she never found it. Reading slowly. Naledi. If you're reading this, then I was too late. Or maybe exactly on time. I don't know anymore. But I want you to know this. You were the first person who ever made me feel seen. Not as my father's son. Not as a future business owner. Not as someone fulfilling expectations. Just as me, Jihoon. The person who writes music nobody hears and dreams dreams nobody knows. You saw me, and I saw you. Your courage, your kindness, the way you made a home in a foreign place even when you were scared. I'm sorry I was too afraid to fight for us. I'm sorry I chose the safe path instead of the brave one. I'm sorry I let you go. But I want you to know, you weren't wrong about what you felt. I felt it too. Every moment we spent together, every conversation, every silence. I was falling in love with you, Naledi. Slowly, then all at once. Then so completely I couldn't remember what it felt like to not love you. I still love you. Even now as I'm leaving, even knowing I'll probably never see you again. Maybe that's why I'm leaving this here. So that somewhere, in some way, you'll know. Even if it changes nothing. Even if it's too late. You made my life better just by being in it. Thank you for that. Keep being brave. Keep being yourself. Keep shining. Jihoon. P.S. Your name suits you. You are a star. My star. The one I navigated by, even when I was too afraid to admit it. He read it one more time. Then he folded it carefully. Looked around the library thinking about where to leave it. In a book she might find? On the table? Under her usual spot. Then he saw it. The underside of the chair across from where he sat. He stood, grabbed his bag, and took one last look at the view. The sun was rising now, painting the campus gold and pink. Beautiful, bittersweet. And then he left. Walked out of the library, across campus, to the subway station, on to Seoul Station, where a train waited to take him to Busan, to his father's company, to the life that had been planned for him since birth. He stared out the train window as Seoul disappeared behind him, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, or if he'd done the only responsible thing he could do. He didn't know. He might never know. 3 months passed. Naledi finished her spring semester. Her grades recovered. She'd thrown herself into studying the way people throw themselves into anything that makes them forget pain. She didn't go to the library much anymore. Too many memories. Too many ghosts. She made a few friends, other international students who understood what it was like to be far from home. She explored more of Seoul, tried to fall back in love with the city that had once promised so much. Some days were easier than others. She'd pulled out those letters less and less. Reading them hurt too much. They reminded her of a hope she had, a hope that someone could see all of her and still stay. But that hope was gone now, put away. Locked in a drawer with the letters and the journal entries and all the evidence of her brief, painful, beautiful, almost love. But she thought about Jihoon often. Wondered if he was okay, if he was happy, if he found peace with his choice, if he ever thought about her. She'd see couples walking across campus and think, that could have been us. She'd pass the cafe where they'd gotten coffee and think, he always ordered the same thing. She'd hear Korean ballads playing in shops and think, he said he wrote music but never shared it with anyone. Her scholarship required her to stay in Korea for 2 years, 1 year down, 1 year to go. And then she'd have to decide, stay or go back to South Africa, extend her studies or return home. She didn't know yet. The future felt uncertain, blurry, like trying to read through tears. On a humid afternoon in late June, Naledi had a meeting with her academic advisor. They were discussing her thesis plans, potential research directions, and the possibility of applying for a PhD program in Korea. The advisor recommended specific books, all of them in the university library, of course. I think some of them are on the 3rd floor, her advisor said, scribbling call numbers on a sticky note. International Relations section. Naledi felt her stomach tighten. She hadn't been to the 3rd floor since March, since that final goodbye with Jihoon. But she needed these books, and she was tired of avoiding places because they hurt. Maybe it was time to reclaim the spaces that had been taken from her. She went to the library that afternoon. Took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Couldn't quite bring herself to take the stairs yet. Those stairs held too many memories. Nobody ever seemed to sit there. Like the universe knew those spots were sacred. Naledi gathered her books from the shelves, and then, drawn by something she couldn't name, gravity, curiosity, masochism, she walked over to the window. Stood looking out at the campus. The trees were full and green now. Summer had arrived. Everything had changed. Everything was the same. She glanced at the tables, their tables, and something made her look closer. At the chairs. She knelt down. Not sure why, just following some instinct. Looked under the seat of her old chair, the one facing the window, the one she'd sat in dozens of times. And there it was. A piece of paper, folded and taped to the underside of the chair seat. Her hands shook as she carefully peeled it free. The tape was old now, yellowed slightly. It had been there for months. She unfolded it. Saw Jihoon's handwriting, neat, careful, Korean-style English lettering she'd recognize anywhere. And she read, Naledi, if you're reading this, then I was too late. The library sounds faded away. The students, the air conditioning, the distant hum of printers. Everything disappeared. Except the words on the page. Words she needed to hear 3 months ago. Words that might have changed everything. Words that changed nothing now, but somehow changed everything anyway. He loved her, was in love with her. Past tense or present tense, she couldn't tell from the letter. But it didn't matter. He felt it. He'd written it down. He'd left it for her to find. She wasn't alone in her feelings. She'd never been alone in them. Tears streamed down her face as she read and reread the letter. Other students glanced at her, crying girl in the library, but she didn't care. She spent 3 months thinking she'd imagined the connection, thinking maybe it had been one-sided, thinking she'd been foolish to hope for something that was never real. But it was real. It had been real, as real for him as it was for her. Her mind raced. Should she respond? Try to find him? He'd been gone for 3 months. Was it too late? Did he still feel this way? Or had distance and time and his life in Busan erased what they'd had? She pulled out her phone, opened their text conversation, the one that had gone silent in February. Her finger hovered over the keyboard. What would she even say? And then she stopped, took a breath, because she realized something. Jihoon left this letter 3 months ago. He knew where she studied. He had her number, her email. If he'd wanted to reach out, to fight for us, to tell her any of this directly, he could have. But he left a hidden note instead, a secret confession, something she might never have found. It was a goodbye, not a door left open. It was him telling her he loved her, yes, but also that he was letting her go. She sat down at the table, at her old seat, and held the letter for a long time. Read it again. Let the words sink in. Let herself feel the bittersweet joy of knowing she was loved, and the quiet grief of knowing it wasn't enough. Then carefully, tenderly, she folded the letter back up, and she taped it back under the chair, right where she had found it. Because this letter, it belonged here, in this library, in this space where their almost love had lived. It was part of the story of this place now, and she didn't want to take it away. She wanted it to stay. A ghost, a memory, a testament that they had existed, even if only briefly. She walked back to her apartment in a daze, unlocked her desk drawer, pulled out all the letters she'd written, months of confessions, pages of feelings, words she'd never sent. She read through them one more time, all of it, her half of a conversation that never happened, her side of a love story that existed only on paper. And then she did something she'd never imagined doing. She chose one letter, not all of them, some things were too private, too raw, but one letter. Her truth, her response to his. She copied it out by hand on fresh paper, making it neat, making it final. And she wrote,
Jihoon, I found your letter today, 3 months after you left it. 3 months after you left. I wish I found it sooner, or maybe I found it exactly when I was supposed to. I don't know anymore. Thank you for writing it. Thank you for leaving it. Thank you for letting me know that I wasn't alone in what I felt, that it was real, that you felt it too. I was falling in love with you. I think you knew that. I think we both knew what was happening between us, even when we couldn't say it out loud. And I'm angry, still angry, that you didn't fight for us, that you chose fear and duty over the possibility of something beautiful, that you let your family's expectations matter more than your own heart. But I also understand. I understand responsibility. I understand duty. I understand being caught between who you are and who you're expected to be. So I'm not writing this to demand anything from you. I'm not writing this to ask you to come back. I'm writing this because you deserve to know what your letter meant to me. That finding it, reading it, knowing you loved me, it healed something that was broken. You asked me to keep being brave, to keep shining. I'm trying. Some days are harder than others, but I'm trying. I hope you find your music again, Jihoon. I hope you find the way to be yourself while honoring your family. I hope you find peace. I hope you find happiness. And I hope someday you find someone you're brave enough to fight for. Someone who makes you realize that love is worth the risk. Maybe that person will be me. And another life, and another time, in another universe where things are simpler. But in this life, in this time, I'm letting you go. Not because I don't love you, but because loving you means wanting you to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include me. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for our afternoons in the library. Thank you for making Seoul feel less lonely for a little while. Take care of yourself. Naledi, your star, always.
She folded it carefully, and the next day she went back to the library, back to the third floor, back to their seats. She knelt down beside his chair, the one he'd always used, facing hers across the table. And she taped her letter to the underside of his chair seat, right next to where his letter still lived under hers. 2 chairs, 2 letters, 2 confessions existing side by side, separated only by the width of a table. A conversation that had finally happened, even if it happened in silence, even if neither of them would ever sit in those chairs again at the same time. She stood, brushed off her knees, and looked at the empty chairs one last time. "Goodbye, Jihoon," she whispered to the empty space. "Thank you for everything." And then she walked away. Not to the second floor, not to another part of the library. She left entirely. Because she'd said what she needed to say. She'd closed the loop. She'd finished the story. Now it was time to start a new chapter. Months turned into a year. Naledi finished her master's degree, applied for and received funding for a PhD program at Korea University. Decided to stay, not because of Jihoon, but because Seoul had become home in ways that had nothing to do with him. She made close friends. She fell in love with Korean cinema and started taking film analysis classes. She volunteered teaching English to immigrant children. She found her rhythm in the city finally. She went to the library often, but she never went back to the third floor, never sat at those window seats again. Some places were meant to remain in the past. The pain had faded into something softer, not forgotten, but integrated, part of her story but not the whole story. And across the country, in Busan, Jihoon was living his planned life, working at his father's company, learning the business, making his family proud, doing exactly what was expected of him. He'd started dating someone his mother had introduced him to, a nice Korean woman from a good family who understood duty and expectations and the importance of tradition. They got along fine. She was kind, smart,
The relationship made sense on paper, but Jihoon felt like he was sleepwalking through his life. He still wrote music. Late at night, after everyone was asleep, he'd sit at his old keyboard and compose songs about stars and libraries, and the love he'd been too afraid to fight for. He never shared them with anyone. They were his secret, his confession, his way of keeping a part of himself alive that duty couldn't touch. On a business trip to Seoul, 2 years after he'd left, Jihoon had a few hours to kill before his train back to Busan. Almost unconsciously, his feet carried him to campus, to the library, to the 3rd floor. He told himself he was just being nostalgic, just revisiting a place that had meant something once. That's all, nothing more. The window seats were occupied. A young couple studying together, sharing headphones, the way he and Naledi never had, but maybe could have if things had been different. He stood there for a moment, watching them, then turned to leave, but something made him look back. Some instinct, some pull. He walked over, asked the couple, "I'm sorry to bother you, but could I just check something under that chair? It'll only take a second." They looked at him strangely, but moved. Jihoon knelt down, looked under the seat he'd always used, and there it was. An envelope. No, not an envelope. A folded piece of paper, taped carefully to the underside of the chair, just like the letter he'd left under hers 2 years ago. His hands shook as he pulled it free. The tape was old, yellowed with time. This had been here for a long time. He moved to a corner of the library, unfolded it, and read.
Jihoon, I found your letter today.
He read it once, twice, 3 times. She'd found his letter. She'd written back. She'd loved him too. Still loved him, past or present tense, he couldn't tell, but it had been real. As real for her as it was for him. And she'd let him go. Not because she didn't love him, but because she did. Jihoon stood there in that library for a long time, holding the letter, reading it over and over. Thinking about choices, about roads taken and not taken, about the life he was living and the life he dreamed about duty and love and whether they had to be opposites. He looked at the letter one more time, memorized every word, let it settle into his heart. And then he did something that surprised himself. He carefully folded it back up. Walked back to the window seats. The couple had returned, studying again. "I'm sorry. One more time." They moved, looking more annoyed now, but he was quick. He knelt down and taped the letter back under his chair, right where she'd left it, right where it belonged. Because he understood now. This wasn't just his letter or her letter. These were their letters. And they belonged here, in this place, where their story had lived, where it would always live,
frozen in time under two chairs that faced each other across a table by a window, a permanent record that they had existed, that they mattered to each other, that their love, however brief and unspoken, had been real.
He stood up, thanked the confused couple, and walked out of the library. Back to the train station. Back to Busan. Back to his life. But something had shifted. A seed had been planted. He'd seen her words, seen her forgiveness, seen her hope that he'd find someone to fight for. And for the first time in 2 years, he wondered, what if that person was still her? What if it wasn't too late? What if courage could be learned even after you'd already failed once? He didn't know. He didn't have answers. But he opened his phone, opened a new note, and he wrote, Naledi, I found your letter today. 2 years after you left it, 2 years after I should have come back. I read what you wrote. I put it back where you left it, the way you put mine back. Because I understand now. Those letters, they're not meant to be taken away. They're meant to stay, to be witnesses, to prove we existed. I don't know if you're still in Seoul. I don't know if you'd want to hear from me after all this time. I don't even know if I have the right to reach out. But I need you to know, I think about you every day. Every single day. And reading your letter, seeing that you understood, that you forgave me even though you were angry, that you let me go because you loved me. It broke something open in me. You were right. I wasn't brave enough then, but I'm learning. I'm trying. I'm trying to figure out how to honor my family while also honoring myself. How to be a good son and also be true to my heart. And my heart still points to you. Like a compass. Like a map. Like your true north, and I've been walking in the wrong direction. I don't know what to do with that. But I needed to write it down. Even if it's just another letter I never send. He saved it in his notes. Another confession to add to the collection. But this time, he didn't close his phone and forget about it. This time, he stared at the words. And he wondered, what if? And so the story continues, as stories do, with two people living their separate lives, carrying their separate hopes, both of them changed by a brief connection that existed mostly in silence, changed by letters they wrote but never sent directly, by words they left hidden in a library, trusting that somehow, someday, they would be found. And on the third floor of a university library, under two chairs that face each other by a window, two letters remain. Folded, taped, waiting. A conversation frozen in time. A love story that happened entirely on paper. Most people walk past those chairs every day and never know they're there. Never know the story those letters tell. Never know about two hearts that found each other and lost each other. And maybe, just maybe, might find each other again. Because some love stories don't end with a kiss, or a wedding, or a happily ever after. Some end with letters under chairs, with confessions left in secret places, with hope preserved like flowers pressed between pages. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the letters we never send, the ones we leave behind for someone to find, the ones we write knowing they might never be read, maybe those are the most honest ones we ever write. Because they're not written to get a response. They're written to tell the truth. To say, I was here. I felt this. You mattered to me. And under two chairs in a library in Seoul, that truth remains. Waiting. Preserved. Eternal. Two letters that will stay there long after Naledi and Jihoon are gone. Long after everyone who knew them is gone. A testament that once two people saw each other, loved each other, let each other go. And that their love, however quiet and unspoken, was real, is real, will always be real. In the letters we never send.